So, continuing with our discussion of topics around the fourth precept, having our words be harmless and constructive, loving and peaceful. In their book, Seeking the Heart of Wisdom, Joseph Goldstein and Jack Kornfield relate a story about a master who is called to heal a sick child. With a few words of prayer, a skeptic in the crowd expressed his doubts about such a superficial way of healing. And the master turned to him and said, "You know nothing of these matters. You're an ignorant fool." The skeptic became red and shook with anger. But before he could settle himself to reply, the master spoke again, asking, "When one word has the power to make you hot and angry, why should not another word be healing?" And I've certainly come to realize through my practice that words are indeed very powerful. And I'd like to look specifically at individual words today, not our full-blown stories, our ideas, or our concepts, the mental formations that happen when we string words together, but to deconstruct this a bit and look at the building blocks, the individual words we choose, and particularly the labels we choose to use for ourselves, for others, and how these affect the reality we create, whether one of anger and conflict or one of healing. Now, Lee reminded us on Monday of the saying, "Sticks and stones can break my bones, but words can never hurt me." And she acknowledged the hogwashiness of this. Even as kids, we may have used this saying to protect ourselves. But I think we also realized this didn't completely ring true. At least I did. We knew that words could hurt. We felt the sting in our embodied experience. As a child, my Uncle Bill gave me the nickname of Flubadub. You may appreciate just from the sound of that, it didn't land well with me. This was a character from the old TV show Howdy Doody, if any of you are of a generation to remember that. It was a puppet show, and Flubadub was a character who wasn't very intelligent and was always messing things up through well-intentioned ignorance. I knew this word hurt, no matter how much my uncle protested that it was just fun, it was cute and endearing. I knew it was hogwash. When I went home in frustrated tears, that may have been the first time my parents offered me the protective mantra of sticks and stones, which was meant to comfort me. But I now recognize how consistent this mantra is with our culture and conditioning of stiff upper lipping it and sucking it up. And this has certainly been my conditioning, to ignore my pain at hurtful words, names, labels, that after all really can't hurt, I was told. Don't be a baby. Oh, another hurtful label. Suck it up. And since the names and words you use for me can't hurt me, well, then certainly the names and labels I use for you can't be harmful either. But fortunately, through the practice, I've begun to be aware of this conditioning of disregarding the impact of words, and rather to practice the noticing and feeling into the embodied experience of how words and labels land in myself. And by doing that, appreciating how my words land for others. And there are so many ways we can label ourselves and others. I imagine we can all think of labels that have been applied to us or that we've applied to ourselves. I've often referred to myself as a little old gray-haired lady. Seems appropriate. But I was curious one day about how this creates an image of myself. So what did I do? I Googled it. I Googled images of little old gray-haired lady. And what came up were in two buckets. The first was a lot of cartoons of the character Maxine. And if you're familiar at all with this, if not, Google it. Not a very positive image of an older woman necessarily. And the other bucket of images were pictures of very frail older women, incapacitated, often in wheelchairs or having to walk with osteoporosis, using walkers or canes. And I realized this wasn't how I wanted to perceive of myself in this moment, or the reality of myself I wanted to create. My words and labels were apt to box me into less of the person I am and want to be. I recognized that every time I used that label, I was giving myself a message of my limitations and feeling constricted and less vital and less alive. This is the reality that label was constructing for me. And these words were words that certainly didn't follow Thich Nhat Hanh's recommendation in his version of the fourth precept to use words that inspire self-confidence, joy, and hope. We can also notice how words and labels are used in social spaces, in the media, in our communications, in ways that diminish others, that show disrespect for others and are divisive. And I don't know about for you, but it can be so easy and tempting to pile on, to take joy when those I disagree with are portrayed by the media and labeled derisively. Or even when I get together with friends and we tell jokes about those people we disagree with. However, I mean, we call them idiots, fools, flubbadubs, and all the labels we can put on people we don't think we like or we disagree with. But as I practice the fourth precept, I'm aware of the pain and destructiveness this contributes to. I just notice how these unkind words land, the ways my heart hardens and armors up around these words, even while there may be laughter. These words no longer seem like fun or amusing, as I realize they're not helpful. They do not help ease suffering. They contribute to creating a reality in which there's more hatred and separation rather than healing. I ran across a wonderful poem titled I Am Not a Label, and later I'll stick a link in the chat box to a lovely inspirational video created around this poem. It speaks to all the ways we get labeled, label ourselves and others, and the impact of this. And I'll paraphrase a bit of the poem. It asks the question, who would you be if the world never gave you a label? Going on, these labels that will forever bind us from seeing a person for who they are, but instead seeing them through the judgmental, prejudicial, artificial filters of these labels of who we think they are. And when you let an artificial label define you, then, my friend, you have chosen smallness over greatness and minimized yourself, confined and divided yourself from others. And it's undeniable fact that where there is division, there will be conflict. It's always us versus them. Labels the way we other folks and create that separation. This poem speaks to how our words, the labels we use, create a world of suffering, and also how letting go of, refraining from these labels can create a world of healing. We can break out of the shell that labels create, to use a metaphor from the poem, just as a caterpillar breaks out of the shell of its cocoon to become a butterfly. By letting go of labels that constrict and confine, we can cultivate loving speech, beautiful speech, that helps us see the fullness, the greatness of our own and others' humanity, and become liberated. And just one more personal example. There's a person who I frequently see when I'm driving around my neighborhood, who's walking through all sorts of weather, carrying his belongings in a worn backpack. When I first saw him, I immediately gave him the label homeless and said to myself, there but for the grace of God go I, as a way of trying to generate compassion rather than judgment. I didn't recognize at the time how that was still othering him by the way I labeled him. And around that time, one of my co-teachers, it may have been Lee or Jay, who's here today, I don't remember. You can raise your hand if it was you, made a comment about the phrase, but for the grace of God go I, stating that perhaps it might be more compassionate to think, there go I, no difference. That really hit home to me. So now when I see this person, I drop the labels of homeless or even of unhoused and simply practice the phrase, there go I. No box, no label, just our common humanity. And I feel my heart open with love and healing, with greatness rather than smallness. So let's practice our greatness, shall we, for a few minutes? Thank you so much for your kind attention. Thank you.